Tonight on Reporting Scotland, police investigating the murder of 6-year-old Alicia McPhail on the Isle of Bute on Monday urged locals to remain vigilant.
It's absolutely terrifying to know that someone in Rothesay, maybe Selby in Rothesay, can do that to a child.
We'll be live from the Isle of Bute with the latest. Also on the programme, Scottish fishing leaders welcome a UK government white paper on how the fishing industry could be managed after Brexit. We look at the history of one of the biggest breakthroughs in 70 years of NHS patient care, the MRI scanner developed in Aberdeen. What debt does England's World Cup campaign owe Alan Russell, the Scottish coach who's helped fine-tune their strikers? And back to the day job for golfing teen Sam Lock, who last night qualified to play at one of golf's biggest tournaments, the Open. Good evening. Police investigating the murder of 6-year-old Alicia McPhail on the Isle of Bute say they're following a number of lines of inquiry. Alicia was reported missing from her grandmother's home on the island on Monday morning. Her body was found in nearby woodland 2.5 hours later. Last night, detectives confirmed their investigation had become a murder inquiry. They've warned islanders to be vigilant about their children's safety and the security of their homes. From the Isle of Bute, Katie Hunter reports.
Recovering potential evidence. Early this evening, police seized a car from the home where Alicia was last seen. Detectives confirmed last night the 6-year-old was murdered. Extra police officers have travelled to Bute to help with the investigation and reassure the public.
These officers will be in patrol for 24/7 throughout the night and days and will remain. They're available to the community. I would also ask that the community would pull together and look out for each other. And please look out for your families and the security and safety of your homes.
Some people on Bute thought Alicia's death might have been an accident. Now they know she was murdered.
It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying to know that someone in Rothesay, maybe Selby in Rothesay, can do that to a child.
I just hope whoever done it, that forensics will get them, because we don't need this in this island.
People are scared for obviously their children and that, and I just think that it's such a bad time. We're all nervous because of it.
Police are searching CCTV and going door to door to try to find out what happened. Alicia's body was found in woodland behind that police cordon. The 6-year-old was reported missing from her grandmother's home, which is about half a mile further down that road. And that's where people have been paying tribute. Some knew Alicia, others didn't.
I seen her a lot with her granny, so I just really wanted just to pay her respects.
It's just heartbreaking what's happened because it's on your doorstep, you know, this place is so safe.
Many people want to show Alicia's family support. They also want her killer caught as soon as possible.
And Katie joins us now from the Isle of Bute. Katie, what's the latest?
Well, Laura, there have been no official updates from police today since the news conference last night when they confirmed Alicia had been murdered. But there has been a lot of police activity at the home where she was last seen behind me. You saw in that report a car being seized. Earlier today, a number of police officers were searching the garden. Now, detectives are still appealing for information. In particular, they're still very keen to speak to anyone who was involved in that initial search for Alicia on Monday morning who hasn't already come forward.
Thank you. Fishing quotas will not form part of any trade deals with the EU, according to a white paper published by the UK government. It says the two issues will be addressed separately and that the UK will begin negotiating as an independent coastal state from 2020. There had been concerns that fishing rights would be traded away as part of a broader deal with the European Union. Our rural affairs correspondent Kevin Keane reports.
For the fishermen, it's a window onto a new world, where historic wrongs will be put right and where boom times beckon. They've long felt the EU has been unfair to them, and today the UK government set out how it wants that new world to look.
If you have someone who's coming from the Philippines or anywhere,
In Peterhead, some reassurance for skippers about the future workforce needs. For Michael Gove, getting this right will be vital for his political reputation as a Brexiteer.
We're taking back control of our territorial waters. Once we leave the European Union, we'll be able to ensure that we decide who comes into our seas, who fishes, and we'll be able to make sure that more of what is caught in our own waters is caught by British boats and landed in British ports.
The White Paper makes it clear that fishing rights and the sale of fish products to the EU will be treated separately.
Do you want it?
There had been fears that quota would be traded away as part of the bigger deal. As ever, that final agreement still hasn't been reached, but industry leaders are hopeful ministers will stick to their word.
Under none of those trading conditions do we ask for some of their natural capital in response to access to the market. So it's equally bizarre to ask the other way, and it would be against WTO.
It doesn't stop them from asking necessarily, does it?
And they will. And that's the point about what we're calling for is some backbone.
There's more chance of finding a backbone in a bloom of jellyfish than in the occupants of the seats around the UK government cabinet table.
A summer of consultation lies ahead, but fishermen are thankful their industry is at last being reshaped. Kevin Keane reporting, Scotland, Peterhead.
Our business and economy editor, Douglas Fraser, is here with us now. Douglas, isn't this just the beginning of yet another Brexit negotiation?
Well, Michael Gove sounds confident. He has to, for political reasons. He's a Brexiteer. And the big fishery organisations are also pleased with what they hear. But as you're hearing there, these are assertions. It's not a done deal that's being presented. They know other members of the European Union, particularly North Sea neighbours and Spain, will push back. They'll say that if they can't get their boats into British waters, then don't expect British waters to be able to fish elsewhere, or more importantly, easy access into the European market for seafood from the UK. And at present, there's £1 billion worth of trading heading in both directions between the UK and the rest of the EU. That means jobs from big fish processing plants to creel boats with 2 men and a dog. Now, from the big fishing boats' point of view, the current system has worked fairly well for them. It's got rid of rival fishing boats, there's less capacity. It's helped fish stocks recover. It means that the industry is investing and profitable. A lot of British skippers have sold their quotas, very often to foreign companies. That's worked well for the British skippers, of course. Unravelling all of the situation that they've reached historically is going to be very difficult. Yes, it's going to involve more negotiation, but not once, repeatedly.
But could Scotland go it alone on fisheries?
Well, this is one of the main areas where Holyrood thinks it ought to repatriate powers from Brussels rather than these powers going to Westminster. And that's a very much hotly disputed issue. But ministers at Holyrood say they were not consulted on this white paper. Michael Gove says he wants to respect and maximise the role for Holyrood and other devolved administrations, but makes clear that Westminster will retain a veto. And if the future for Scotland is seen as being independence, then the question is, well, if Scotland's applying to rejoin the European Union, on what terms would it do so for the fisheries industry?
Douglas, thank you. A woman has broken down in the dock as she was jailed for 3 years for killing her boyfriend in a car crash. 21-year-old Natasha Scott lost control of her Vauxhall Corsa after speeding from Maybole to Ayr 2 years ago. Her car ploughed into a fence, brick wall and telegraph pole before coming to a halt. Her boyfriend Kai Milligan, who was also 21, was a rear seat passenger. He died while 3 teenagers who were also in the car were injured. One of them, a 15-year-old boy, needed major surgery to reconstruct his face following the crash. Scottish prosecutors will argue that the charges brought by Spain against St Andrews academic Clara Ponsati for her part in Catalonia's push for independence would amount to treason and conspiracy in Scotland. Professor Ponsati, who was Education Minister in the Catalan government at the time, faces extradition to Spain for helping organise October's independence referendum. Edinburgh Sheriff Court will consider the case tomorrow ahead of a full extradition hearing to begin at the end of the month. Professor Ponsati denies all the charges and is resisting Spain's attempt to have her sent back. Farmers have warned of an impending crisis as drought conditions affect parts of the south, northeast and the Highlands of Scotland. They said land had been scorched during the heatwave, leaving some struggling to feed livestock. After several weeks without significant rainfall, the lack of grass has also made some farmers unable to make enough silage to see them through the winter. By contrast, many soft fruit producers across Scotland are celebrating a bumper harvest. Prime Minister Theresa May says all donations to the Scottish Conservatives are accepted and declared in accordance with the law. The SNP used Prime Minister's questions to claim the Scottish Conservatives are shielding donations. Our political correspondent Nick Eardley is in Westminster for us. So Nick, just tell us about the background to this story.
Well, Laura, this is all about money and who makes donations to political parties in Scotland. It's something the Ferret website has been looking at, in particular at donations to the Scottish Conservatives. And it raised some questions in particular about an organisation known as the Scottish Unionist Association Trust. Reports say it has given more than £300,000 to the party over the last 17 years, including to some high-profile general election candidates. Now, before today, we didn't know much about who was behind the trust or where its money came from. Indeed, earlier, one of the MPs who it gave money to, David Duckett, was asked by the BBC. He said it was all above board, but he didn't know much about the organisation because he was more interested in winning elections than looking at where the money was coming from. Now, this was brought up at Prime Minister's questions earlier, with the SNP accusing the Scottish Tories of systematically shielding donations.
The Trust has donated 319,000 people to the Scottish Conservatives, yet there is no information available about who the people are who currently manage the Trust, no public accounts to indicate who its donors are or what assets it holds.
I can tell the Right Honourable Gentleman that all donations to the Scottish Conservative Party are accepted and declared in accordance with the law. And the Scottish Conservative Party works with the Electoral Commission to make sure that that is all done properly.
And tonight, Nick, we've heard from the Trust involved.
Yeah, we have. A spokesperson for the Trust contacted the BBC after Prime Minister's questions today. They say the money behind the Trust comes from investments, primarily from sales of property assets, and it has confirmed who the trustees are. Many of them are well-known faces in Scottish Conservative circles in Scotland, including the former MP Peter Duncan. The Electoral Commission, though, is continuing to look into whether any election laws have been broken. A spokesperson for the Trust says they'll cooperate with that investigation.
Nick at Westminster, thank you. You're watching BBC Reporting Scotland. It's 18 minutes to 7. A reminder of tonight's top story. Police investigating the murder of 6-year-old Alicia McPhail on the Isle of Bute on Monday urge locals to remain vigilant. And back to the day job for Stonehaven golfing teen Sam Locke, who last night qualified to play at one of golf's biggest tournaments, the Open. It's been described as the game changer of modern medicine. Developed at Aberdeen University, the MRI, or magnetic resonance imaging scanner, has revolutionised the diagnosis of chronic conditions from cancer to heart disease, saving numerous lives. As the NHS celebrates its 70th anniversary, our reporter Fiona Stalker looks at how the machine has changed the face of medicine.
It's a little bit of a daunting experience for somebody maybe that has never had one before, but they make you as comfortable as you can be. It does make a lot of noises, which is fine because they give you hearing protection like earplugs and a set of headphones. They can offer you music, which is great because it kind of just distracts your mind a little bit from everything that is happening.
Are you okay there?
I'm fine, thank you.
Esti Kutsia has been given the all-clear from breast cancer. This is a routine follow-up MRI scan.
You're all finished. We'll just be in to take you out. Well done. Thank you.
The information from her MRI scans shaped Esti's treatment that saved her life.
I think it was just really to have not missed anything that was not seen under mammography or ultrasound. It was really just to make absolutely sure that we're not missing a hidden lesion or anything like that, where MRI is a lot more specific in those regions.
And the MRI can do this by using a magnetic field and radio waves to produce detailed pictures of the inside of the body, something that had never been done before.
I think it was revolutionary. There have been several instances where things have been game changers, but I think MRI is probably the biggest. We can pick up lesions when they wouldn't be visible using other modalities. So that saves lives by early diagnosis.
It brings back a lot of memories, so it's quite fun really. I mean, it's completely unlike a modern MRI scanner.
Now a museum piece, this is the original game changer, the world's first full-body MRI scanner.
Now the tube apparently was rescued from a children's play tunnel area in the city, and it was being discarded.
This prototype was developed in the 1970s by a team of Aberdeen scientists, literally held together by nuts, bolts and gaffer tape.
Our department was quite adventurous in what it got up to, and I was quite young at the time, and it just seemed like a very interesting thing to be doing. But very quickly after scanning that first patient, we realised that this was A, going to work, and B, it was going to be useful.
I'm an engineer by background, so I like to understand things. So the knowledge of that is, for me, is quite important.
Perfect. Do you want the radio on for this?
MRI scans are now used all over the world on many millions of patients every year.
Actually, the MRI scans have been very helpful in terms of just another means of figuring out here's what's happened and here's how it's going to develop and a way to track that. So I think for me it's been very useful, very beneficial.
And the news is good?
I hope so.
Patients are already being scanned in the next generation MRI, described as 100 MRIs in one. In time, they'll no doubt become just part of everyday medicine. Fiona Stalker reporting, Scotland, Aberdeen.
Scotland's Culture Secretary has publicly rebuked the SNP leader of Edinburgh City Council for suggesting a tourist tax could be up and running in the city by next year. Councillor Adam McVeigh posted his views on Twitter, but Fiona Hislop replied there was no agreement with the Scottish Government. Joanne Macaulay reports.
Edinburgh City Council is proposing a transient visitor levy, which would add £1 onto hotel guests' bills. The money raised would be used to pay for local services in Edinburgh. Many in the business community have opposed the idea because they say it would damage tourism, and in the past the Scottish Government has ruled it out too. But today the SNP leader of Edinburgh City Council wrote on Twitter, "In the next 12 months our plans for a tourist tax will be ready for implementation. Our timeline is robust and we'll be ready to go." But in an apparent rebuke, the Culture Secretary Fiona Hislop replied, "You have no shared plans, no tourist business consultation and no agreement with the Scottish Government." Opposition parties have described it as an embarrassing split at the top of the SNP.
I'm astonished that it's been played out in this way. You would normally think that within a party you'd have private discussions and you'd take matters forward, but I can only sense that ministers are angry and frustrated with the council's approach to this because they've been so forthright in saying that they'll get this in place in a year when they genuinely don't have that permission.
Adam McVeigh wasn't available for interview today, but last week he was at a meeting with the local authority organisation COSLA, where they backed the tourist tax plan, a stance supported by Labour.
Debate, I think, is always healthy in political parties, but what Fiona Hislop has to respect is that there's a unanimous position in Scotland's councils. COSLA have said that they want this tax. There's a broad coalition of support, and we would expect the Cabinet Secretary to take that seriously and not to have a go at people on Twitter.
Edinburgh's tourist sector is booming, but the council doesn't have the power to introduce a tourist tax on its own. That requires an act of the Scottish Parliament. And today the Scottish Government said it had no plans to introduce a charge of that kind. Joanne Macaulay reporting, Scotland, Edinburgh.
MSPs want witnesses and victims of crime to speak to them about their experience of the justice system. It's part of the Scottish Parliament's Justice Committee's review of the government's new Vulnerable Witnesses Bill. The legislation would bring about greater use of pre-recorded statements and evidence for vulnerable witnesses in criminal cases, with a focus on child witnesses in the most serious cases. The committee said it would also like to hear from young people and those who've experienced similar systems internationally. He's been dubbed footballers' best attacking coach, and he's the Scot who's trying to help England win the World Cup. Retired striker Alan Russell is an integral member of Gareth Southgate's backroom team, and he's been credited with the set pieces that have helped England reach the quarter-finals in Russia. Martin Dowden reports.
A familiar face to some Scottish football fans, Alan Russell is now a familiar face in the England setup on how to score goals. Despite not overly hitting the heights as a player at clubs such as Hamilton, St Mirren, Partick Thistle, Airdrie and Kilmarnock, netting 56 goals in his career in Scotland, the question is how you go from playing largely in the lower leagues in Scotland to where he is now.
And it's the first goal in the SPL for Alan Russell. It's only his third start at this level.
Well, he had a decent career in Scotland, but when he went to America, I think he's seen some of the NFL teams had specialist coaching in terms of offence, defence, a kicker, the quarterback, running back. All these different departments in the teams had specific coaching. And I think Alan looked at that and thought he could bring it into soccer, bring it into striking play. And I think it's never been common in Britain to have a striker coach. And Alan's kind of brought that into the culture here. He's the first that started it. And I think you'll see a lot more clubs following.
Well, one sport that fully embraces specialist coaching is rugby, where individual positions are rigorously worked on to make marginal gains.
The game nowadays is there's so many small margins in the game that you need specialist coaching working in specialist areas just to be able to ensure that those margins are met. A lot of teams play the same way, and those specialist coaches make such a difference.
I've thought it. Finally now, last night he qualified for one of golf's biggest tournaments. Today he was back at work. It's been quite a week for teenage golfer Sam Lock from Stonehaven, who'll play at the Open in Carnoustie in 2 weeks' time. His boss and mentor is former champion Paul Lawrie, who clinched the Claret Jug at the same course nearly 20 years ago. Rebecca Curran reports.
From teas to coffees, 19-year-old Sam Lock qualified for the Open last night. Hours later, he's back to work at former champion Paul Lawrie's golf centre.
You know, he's been there and done everything in the game, so to ask him anything at any time, you know, not many people have that opportunity, so I feel like I need to make the most of it. But yeah, obviously I can't wait to go and play. I mean, it's the biggest tournament in the world with the best players in the world, so it'll be good to see how I compare to them on that week.
Laurie's the winner.
Sam wasn't even a year old when his boss and mentor won the Open at Carnoustie in '99. Nearly 2 decades on, it's his turn to join golf's biggest names at the Angus Links.
I feel old anyway, but I feel even older now. It's all about Sam, it's not about what I've done. He's the boy that's gone out there, he's the boy that's hitting the shots and doing all the work. We just kind of help him a little bit along his way.
So no day off for Sam, much to the delight of his regular customers.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Yeah, it's great for a young lad from the North East to qualify for the Open. It's great, we look forward to see him doing well during the tournament.
It wasn't all work and no play. In 2 short weeks, he'll be at the Open, but it's clear his feet will remain firmly on the ground. Rebecca Curran, reporting Scotland, Aberdeen.
Weather now, and I dare to say you have an easy job just now, Christopher.
You might say that. Thank you very much indeed. Hello there. It was another dry day pretty much across the board. Plenty of sunshine around, and warm sunshine at that too. In Aviemore, 29 degrees this afternoon. Many areas inland reaching the mid-20s. You can see on the satellite picture from earlier there was a few areas of fair weather cloud bubbling up and some stubborn cloud across Shetland, but Orkney faring well, and a lovely photo from one of our weather watchers taking in Kirkwall Bay there. Now, the chance of a few showers around Inverness in the far north over the next wee while, but really it's a very small chance. Overnight, it's then dry. Some thicker cloud in the northwest, temperatures around 12 to 14 Celsius. That cloud is a weak weather front which comes our way tomorrow. You can see it on the chart there. Whilst we have high pressure controlling things, this weather front tries to slip through. Doesn't really bring any rain, but it will bring some thicker cloud in the morning for the northwest, and through the day slowly edge eastwards. You can just about make it out on the chart there because not much oomph to it really. That cloud tends to break up, and well, where the cloud is thick enough, perhaps the odd spot of light drizzle, the odd shower, but generally it's another dry one. It is a cold front though, so the temperatures will be lower tomorrow. Afternoon highs around 19 to 22 Celsius. So if you had the 29 degrees in Aviemore today, tomorrow it will feel a good bit cooler. And winds generally light to moderate from the southwest around the northwest coast, and a westerly for the Northern Isles, but plenty of sunshine for the Northern Isles through the afternoon after what will be a cloudy start. Rest of the afternoon into the evening, plenty of sunshine to end the day, and then Friday, another dry day. Some thicker cloud in the northwest, sunnier skies through central, southern and eastern parts, perhaps the odd spot of drizzle where the cloud is thicker, and temperatures again a wee bit lower than what we've had, 18 to 22 Celsius. But temperatures rebound for the weekend. We're looking at mid-20s, dry and sunny, a little more cloud in the northwest, 26 degrees by mid-afternoon. That's the forecast for now.
Chris, thank you. And now a reminder of tonight's main news. Police in Wiltshire say 2 people are critically ill in hospital after being exposed to an unknown substance. The man and woman were found unconscious at a house in the town of Amesbury, close to Salisbury, where a former Russian spy and his daughter were poisoned with a nerve agent in March. And police investigating the murder of 6-year-old Alicia McPhail on the Isle of Bute say they're following a number of lines of inquiry. Tonight, police removed a car from her grandmother's home where Alicia went missing. And that's Reporting Scotland for now. I'll be back with the late bulletin just after the 10 o'clock news tonight. Until then, from all of us here in Glasgow and all around the country, have a great evening. Bye-bye.